Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply. In this video is to bring you a closer look at the Optex Os-12C ST. This is a single beam set. Here is the amplifier or the controller. See if we can get the camera to focus on that. And this video is going to go over the installation instructions. It will go over a visual and dimensional review of the item itself. And this is the amplifier part. Let's touch on the dimensional properties. Overall of the mounting case on the back, about 3 5/8. Has an overall width about 1 13/16 inches, and an overall projection of about 1 3/8. You've got your power, your safety, and your test input, should there be one. Then you've got your receiver and emitter runs of the sensors themselves, and here they are. You've got the blue and the gray. Emitter and receiver. The emitter is the gray set. The receiver is the blue set. And these are appropriate for doors that are up to 23 feet. Well, the opening size that you're monitoring would be a maximum of 23 feet. And then you get a couple of screws for attaching the amplifier body down. Okay. Now, there is a link below this video to the installation instructions, and let's move to that document now. So, when the equipment is in failure mode, the doors are held open. That's how sensors generally work, where the doors will fail open, and that's intentional to provide the safety of the opening and the flow of traffic. It's important that you install these in accordance with code and the prevailing code, the local code, but it's also important for you to instruct the end user, the building owner, or that person's representative on the installation, demonstrating safe operation, and making sure that person understands and has been instructed in the safe operation of the door. So, again, now let's get into the specifications on page 1. Installation distance less than 10 meters, but we've got these as 23 feet. This will run on 12 to 24 VAC or 12 to 30 VDC and draws 160 milliamps. You will have a variety of different colors. Well, you'll have red, green, or off, depending on the condition or the state of the sensors. We'll talk about that more later. The amplifier has the ability for a test input, which is now code, that you'll have a test input, which basically, if I understand it correctly, every time the operator, the motor gearbox controller cycles, it sends a test to the sensors to say, "Hi, are you okay?" And that happens on every cycle, and this OS-12C ST has that test input to be compliant with code. Safety output, 50 volts at 0.3 amp, and can be configured in a normally open or normally closed condition depending on what the controller is doing. Response time, 0.1 second from the moment of beam cutoff. So if you're entering the detection zone, you got 1/10 of a second before the material will activate. Relay hold time, 1/2 of a second. Operating temperature from 20 below to, from 4 below Fahrenheit to 131. The weight of the unit, of the amplifier at least, is 2.2 ounces. And in this kit, you're going to get the amplifier, the 2 screws, the manual, and then the emitter and receiver beam set. Now let's move on to identification of the amplifier and what's happening on the amplifier. Now let's conduct a visual tour of the items, and looking at the installation instructions, we've got some items that are called out here. You've got 1 is your mounting hole, 2 is your terminal block, items 7 through 14, which is the end that you're going to attach the sensors to, 7 through 14 up here, and we're going to go over that in a moment. You've got item number 3, your wire connection button, these items here. Okay. Number 4 is your programming button. 5 are your indicators. And 6 is your terminal block, 1 through 6, which is the power input, and then your test inputs along with your safety output. Okay. Okay, now continuing with the visual tour, we're going to get into the what they call separately sold optional items. Well, you know, these are the emitter and receiver sets. You've got your push-in style mount that's here. You could also purchase the separate mounting plate, a rectangular escutcheon, a couple of holes for screws, and this will sit in should you have a deep enough jam application where you'd like to have a mounting plate attach to the jam installation. Otherwise, you're just drilling a small hole, which they have listed as 1/2 inch. Okay. Then you've got your 2 leads down here, and you'll notice that they're different. One has a bit of a shield on it, and you're going to want to take note that that's important, that they are different and not to be modified at all. And we're going to go over that in a moment when we look at the further part of the installation instructions. Got a shield here. This wire does not have it. Now moving on into the installation aspect of the material, and be mindful about installing the material at the proper height, etc. But you're going to drill a 1/2 inch hole and you're going to push the sensors in, obviously running the wires back to the amplifier. If you're not using the installation plate, it's just a drill a hole and push application. Now in the installation instructions, there's a note on drilling the mounting holes. Be sure to drill the sensor heads so that they face each other and that it's obviously going to be level. They're also saying after drilling the holes, remove the flashes around the holes, meaning you're going to want to ream the hole out and file it so that it's flat, because obviously the sensor needs to sit flat into the hole that you've drilled, causing the sensor head to tilt. On setting of one push plate, be sure the sensor heads are seated securely, and if it's not secured, you're not going to have proper activation signal. Do not place any swaying object within the path of the beams, because you might have false positives, and be held open is the bottom line. Installing the amplifier, it's just the 2 screws that have been shown previously. The distance to be set, these installation instructions call them out at 32 feet 10 inch, but the specifications say 23 feet. And I would think that 23 feet is what we're going to go with. That's the lesser of the 2. Now we're going to get into the portion of wiring the sensor heads, which is where it will come into play, where you're going to install the wire, and the one that has the shield and the other one that's defined as the conductor. So let's start with the installation in step 3. Now looking at step 3 of the installation instructions, where you are preparing the wire leads, they are already prepared per the installation instructions. You've got your conductor with the partial insulation, then you've got your shield. Okay. they need to be prepped this way because you don't want to have unintentional interference between the wires. Now, if you're doing a one beam installation, and this amplifier can handle 2 sets of beams, which is not uncommon either for different heights depending on the application. The receiving for beam 1 and the emitting for beam 1 will be in 7 and 8 and 11 and 12 respectively. That's a challenge. Okay, 7 and 8, right here. You can't see that on the camera, would be my guess, but it's indicated. 7 and 8. You've got the conductor wire in 7, then the shield wire in 8, and then the conductor wire in 11 for the emitter, which is gray, and the shield wire in 12. Don't extend the wires again. Don't modify them in any way. You don't want to unintentionally influence the operation of the wires by introducing the possibility for noise causing malfunction. Okay. Connecting the power supply wires and the output signals, you're going to have your input in 1 and 2, 12 volt A or DC within that range. Your safety output will be normally open or normally closed, and then your test, should your controller have the test function. And the stated connection capacity is there depending on whether you're using solid or stranded wire, so be mindful of that because it will be different on what you're dealing. Solid wire is going to be a 26 gauge wire, and if it's stranded, you need to come down to 22 gauge wire. Don't connect more than 2 wires to one terminal. Depressing the buttons will allow you to connect the wires. Now, moving on to the testing capability or testing phase of this installation, press the programming button for more than 1 second. When the green and when the green and red LED blinking becomes green and red no blinking, the setting is completed. The proper sensitivity is adjusted automatically, and it's likely that you won't have to change any sensitivity whatsoever. But you can review that in the table that's shown in adjustment and checking step 1. And if we're doing a single beam installation, which we are here, when you've got green on, you're going to have a correct set adjustment and sensitivity. If you've got green and red blinking alternately, the sensitivity is insufficient, and check the settings. So you're going to want to make sure that when checking that you don't have something in the detection area, and that the lens surface is clean, and that the wiring has been conducted properly, and that you're going to want to make sure that they're mounted straight. Sensitivity adjustments, set the sensitivity in the environment same as the actual regular use. Also be sure that there is no swaying object. Anything that's in front of the item, a planter is what they show. You'll want to move that away. When changing the number of sensor head, be sure to press the programming button. All sensor heads can be adjusted at once. The apparatus does not operate properly if the programming button has not been pressed on initial setup or when you are re-initializing based on the change in the sensor head. The testing of the operation when you have the operation indicator off, that means that it's in detection mode, that someone is passing through the space. If you've got green-red, you're in an on condition and that you are in standby status either before or after traffic has passed, putting the units back into standby mode. Okay, there's a table in field 3 showing all of that. Now, moving into the select normally open or normally closed, it will need to be determined what your controller is expecting or how it's operating. Now, according to step 2, you can set the amplifier mode to give you either low sensitivity or high sensitivity, normally open or normally closed. And what they want you to do is to press and hold the programming button until the red LED blinks, and you will press the programming button to select the appropriate setting out of the 4 modes, A through D, within 10 seconds. So you'll get it into programming mode, and then you'll depress the button based on the quantity A through D to set it into the proper normally open or normally closed mode. Press the programming button until green and red LED blinking goes off to finalize the settings. And you do have to go through the settings mode in order to get the unit to work properly. 10 seconds is the timeout. If nothing's done, you'll start from scratch over. And if you do not have a test input function on your controller, you'll set the unit into mode B, is what you'll set it into. And completing the review of this Optex jam sensor unit, you've got troubleshooting. And if it doesn't operate, obviously the obvious things, checking that the wiring is done correctly, checking to make sure that you've got proper voltage coming in, of course, with your multimeter. Any sort of damage that's been done to the wires, pulling it through, drilling holes, sharp objects that it's resting against or sliding against, be mindful of that. Inappropriate installation or the distance, the amplifier mode not being adjusted correctly, so check those settings. And if it's ghosting, meaning that you've got false operation out of it, check for a dirty lens. Check for something that is triggering it. You may have big box store. At the end of the day, things get moved from the outer apron of the building towards the doors. So wind, and again, this planter, a leaf gets blown into the detection area. You might be too far in the distance, or you might not be aligned properly. Dirty lens again. Amplifier mode setting is not adjusted, so check that if it's ghosting. Operating, because it's fail safe is the operation where the doors will fail open. So check all of that. Now, that concludes the review of this item, and there is a link below this video to the manufacturer's page where you can pull up not only all of the Optex products that we sell, but also a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to the full product catalog. If you have any questions on the Optex OS-12C single beam unit or any other Optex product, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you very much.